Bob Snipes, and I'm the second reader at our Christian Science Society in Ellsworth, Maine. Our society joins with the First Church of Christ Zionist, Bangor, Maine, in sponsoring this talk. What a joy it is to welcome our speaker, Fujiko Science, who is a member of the Christian Science Board of Lectureship of the First Church of Christ Zionist in Boston. Fujiko divides her time between Tokyo, Japan, and the US. She is a full-time Christian Science practitioner and also a teacher of Christian Science. A Christian Science practitioner is someone who helps others with healings through prayer alone. I had the pleasure of getting to know Fujiko when she visited our area several years ago. What a wonderful ambassador she is for good, enfolding everyone in love, people of all faiths, nationalities, ages, and circumstances. Fujiko's education began with her attending a German preschool and kindergarten in Mumbai, India. As a young adult, she desired to go to America to learn what other young people her age were thinking. She left Tokyo for Honolulu, where she attended college and met Mark Sines, who would later become her husband. Fujiko first attended a Christian Science service to hear a friend sing. That's where she was able to fulfill her daughter's desire to go to Sunday school. While the girls were in Sunday school, she would attend the church service. By listening to the weekly Bible lessons, she was healed of a diagnosed severe heart problem. The glimpses Fujiko had into her heritage as a child of God gave her the insight that we will hear about in tonight's lecture titled, God's Eye View of You. A final note, there will be a question and answer session right after the talk. Please join me in welcoming Fujiko Science.
Good evening, friends and neighbors around Bangor and Ellsworth. Thank you, Bob, for your introduction, and thank you for all the music and beautiful pictures of Maine. First, I thought, what is it that I should start this lecture with? And it just came to me a few minutes ago, to celebrate. To celebrate, not because it's the beginning of summer and you get to see your families and friends. I'm sure Maine will be full of tourists by this summer, midsummer. What I mean by celebrating is what you have done in the last year and a half. I want to celebrate to really appreciate your patience, wisdom, your listening ear, the time to pray and to love. Love your neighbors. At times when we seem to be feeling that so much division and difficulties, challenges are facing us, we need to remember those who have done a great deal to make our lives much more harmonious. Talking about harmonious, some of those songs that I was listening to, the harmony in life is just so important. And tonight's talk, as a student of Christian Science, I want to talk about how important it is to experience this harmony within ourselves and then outside of our own little world. Worldwide, in your community, in your family, and especially within yourself. Well, the word science really has something to do with this harmony. When you think of science, you might think of a person in the lab wearing white lab coat, or science that takes us to outer space. But when I say science, it is really science that we all know, starting with inquiry, questioning. Why does this happen? Or how do I solve problems? All sciences begin with questions. And as we really listen and look at all the evidences Sometimes we need to really leave those evidences and come to a sense of your own trusting listening to intuition. All advancement in science came from these intuitions. If they stayed with the evidences of what they had before, we have never advanced. In a way, advancement is always leaving the old for the new. Christian Science is a science of finding that harmony to advance for common good. We don't want to lock this science within just a particular religion. As we know, the Christianity started with the teachings of Christ Jesus. But Christ Jesus didn't want us to lock his teaching within one denomination or a religion. In fact, he is the one who started teaching all people of different walks of life, different faith background, or not even having a background, those who are non-Jews, to let them know that there is oneness. And this title, God's eye view of you, really comes from the sense that God is this universal, impartial, unconditional love that Jesus had taught. And I'm using a textbook. Besides the Holy Bible, I'm going to be using a textbook of Christian Science, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, written by your very own Mary Baker Eddy, who was born and lived in New England, USA. Well, this book, just to let you know that if you want to know more about this author, Mary Baker Eddy, of course, you can go to Mary Baker Eddy Library website to see what kind of places where she came from, what struggles she had. But one of the things that I like to share these days is to point to the fact that this book already shows who she was. One of the things that I love when I first time opened this book, besides seeing the title of this book, I saw 3 quotes, and especially the first two I'd like to share. She put this as a very first quote: "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." These are Christ Jesus' words written in John, Gospel according to John. And next, she has this quote: "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so," by Shakespeare. This is a line from Hamlet. But I just felt this woman is interested in truth. This woman is interested in freedom. This woman is interested in thinking. No, true advancement cannot come from just a blind belief. We need to have people examine. And when we have ideas that can really bless the broader sense of community, then we practice. The Christian Science practice is really the science that each one of you have probably already been, maybe not as a name Christian Science, but you already have been practicing. One of the things that I love is that I was allowed to ask all sorts of questions. Today, I want to start with something that I asked myself. When I was watching and admiring a bouquet of flowers, I'm sure the flowers are beautiful in your area now. But one time when I was admiring these flowers, I also saw a bumblebee looking at the same flowers. And the question came to my mind: is this bumblebee seeing the same flowers as I see them? And you know from our science classes that insects have different structure of eyes, and what they see also look different. They see more things in the infrared light than the way we see it. So then I asked the next question: then what is the reality of these flowers? What is the reality? If we cannot depend on our eyes or insects' eyes, what is the truth about the flowers that I'm looking at? As we know, uh, as we say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Reality is in the eye of the beholder. Then I thought, what if we have an eye that is so pure? It has a lens that obliterates anything that is not loving or godlike or good. That whatever is reflected on that eye is beautiful and perfect. And this, I now come to see, is the eye of God, the way God sees us. You probably know the phrase, the apple of my eye. You are the apple of my eye. And I used to think that phrase comes from a popular love song. I know when you're in love with someone, you look at that person's eyes. If you're taking care of your lovely grandchildren, you keep your eye on them. Who's reflected on that eye? That child. That child is right on the middle of your eye, the pupil, the young student. Interesting thing about this reflection is even if the 6'4" football player is standing in front of me, when I look at him, the reflection on my eye, right in the middle of my eye, is this small. Well, interestingly enough, when I looked at the original word I found in the Bible says in Hebrew, instead of the apple of the eye, it says, you are a child of my eye. Well, there are a couple of places in the Old Testament where I can just read where it is translated as apple of his eye. But when I say apple, please think of this child. First one is in Deuteronomy. He, meaning God, he found him in a desert land and in the waste howling wilderness. He led him about. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. And in Psalms, show your marvelous loving kindness, O you that save by your right hand, them which put their trust in you from those that rise up against them. Keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me under the shadow of your wings. Keep me as the child of your eye. The pupil, a small child in the middle of your eye. That's you. That is also universal because I know from my language in Japanese and in Chinese character, we use these two parts in the character. One part is I, and the other part is a child. That meaning pupil. Always staying in the center of God's eye, we can see that how much love there is that had been protecting you all these months and will continue to guide you moving ahead. Also, I like to share some examples of how we see things really changed our experiences. I'm sure if you're a teacher, you have probably read the report that when one teacher was giving a classroom full of students who were actually not so academically easy to teach, uh, but was told that these students are excellent students. That year, teachers seeing them that way, these students improved in the way that no other method had helped them. This alone teaches me that how we see things is actually how we think, and that changes the whole experience. Well, many years ago, as a elementary school student, I experienced this one time that I was washed over by this overwhelming sense of love. And suddenly I felt how beautiful it was to love. I didn't know where it came from. So I looked around and I thought I can love all my classmates. But it dawned on me to ask me this question: Fujiko, can you love that science teacher that everybody hates? He was not really pleasant to look at, but he was not, even his speech, the way he taught, was not very good. But when I thought of this question, the answer was overwhelming affirmative yes. And I was really interested. The interesting part is that I forgot about this incident for many years, but it was when I started studying Christian Science and started reading this textbook, Science and Health, with Key to Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, that I remember this incident. This is the sentences that I read when I remember this incident. It says on page 476, Jesus beheld in science the perfect man, who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appears to mortals. In this perfect man, the Savior saw God's own likeness, and this correct view of man healed the sick. Here it says, even seeing a man, a perfect man, healed the sick. What does this seeing have anything to do with healing? Bringing more harmony, more ideas, solutions. It dawned on me that in my case, the first thing that happened was to have that overwhelming sense, like washed over by this love, the unconditional love. And I felt that I could love. But that really is the essence in the healing. Even with Jesus, when you look into the Bible, it always says Jesus had compassion. Compassion not as in humanly having this love for someone because you feel sorry or because you feel that affections are important. He felt God as he knows as his own Father, as this love itself. That love written with capital L. So Jesus, beholding everyone in science, actually is based on the Bible, how God sees us. In fact, by seeing, we exist, and by seeing, we are created. The very first chapter in Genesis mentions that God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. God created man in his own image, in the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Image and likeness. I used to think, what is image and likeness of God or spirit? Great spirit. Image and likeness actually are the children. Make yourself as your own image must be this having this relationship of a father and mother, God, with this child. I'm sure someone, when you were a child, came to you and said, oh, you remind me of your father, or you remind me of your mother, because you bear the image and likeness of your parent. So image and likeness is what Jesus understood him to be, that Jesus was an image and likeness of God. And when he saw with this understanding others, he had this compassion of understanding these are also the children of God. And that correct view healed the sick. When I say, here it says, Jesus beheld in science the perfect man. By perfect, I mean, as a regular dictionary says, done, complete, and finished. Man that cannot be changed, altered, or manipulated, or influenced. That's the perfect man that Jesus knew, man in the image and likeness of God, never change. Well, some years ago, I was invited to go back to Mumbai, India. When I was there, it was called Bombay, but I was there to speak uh, for the students in the nursing school in the medical university. And I knew these students came from all different walks of life. And some of them were Hindi, some of them were Christian, some of them were Buddhist, and some of the others, there were different, many different faith that were represented in that class. So when I was asked to share about how people can be healed through prayer, I shared the Lord's Prayer because Jesus had given us the Lord's Prayer for all mankind. He starts this prayer with Our Father, not with the name of his religious tradition, like Jehovah or Elohim. So, as I was sharing these ideas with these nurses, especially talking about how they can protect themselves by knowing not only they themselves, but patients they are caring for also have the same Father, Mother God, a Spirit, that we are first uh, children of God, not identifying with an illness, but with the name, of course, that person's given name, but to remember the inheritance, the heritage of these patients, protect themselves. But as I was sharing this, one of the instructors raised her hand and said, "May I share some experience?" Because we were talking about healing. She really probably wanted to ask whether the experience that she had relates to Christian Science or the explanation that I was giving about how Jesus was giving his teaching to all mankind. He said, I'm sorry, the instructor was woman. She said many years ago she was diagnosed with a cancer in pancreas in the latter stage. She was a nurse at that time, so she knew how dire that situation was, and with very few options for treatment, she fell deep into a depression. And she suddenly became an unhappy person, not even wanting to go for a walk, or even to go to work. She was given a time to rest, to really think about what was taking place. But she was also invited around that time to attend a family gathering. It's a very large relatives gathering to celebrate someone's wedding anniversary. Well, she didn't really want to go, but at the same time, she felt this might be the last time I would see my relatives. And there are some children that she loved. Well, so she decided to go, but she sat in the corner of the very big room, almost trying not to be noticed. But a child, her niece, noticed her, ran up to her, and said, "What's wrong with you, Auntie?" Because the auntie was not her usual jovial self. Well, this auntie didn't want to mention the name of the disease, so she simply said, "Well, Auntie has very dark, something dark inside the stomach. Auntie has something bad inside me." Well, to this explanation, this niece immediately said with very strong voice, "No, Auntie, you don't have anything bad or evil inside you." And she looked at her straight in her eyes and then hugged her, ran off and to play with other children. Going home from that gathering to back to her home in the bus, she just remembered in tears, thinking that this might have been the last time she would be seeing some of her favorite relatives, but especially this niece. And as she was crying, she said in the middle of crying, her tears changed from the tears of sadness to the tears of a sense of peace. She remembered how her niece looked at her and declared that there was nothing bad or dark inside her. Well, a few days later, she had to go back to the same hospital where she was diagnosed and had been going for a couple of times to examine and try to decide what to do. This time, she was asked to wait for a long time. Her doctor came out finally and shaking his head in a way that, as you know, some Indians say it, like, yes, is this. He came out and said, I cannot find, or we cannot, a group of doctors cannot find the cancer in you. It was definitely not a misdiagnosis. He knew that they had seen this cancer before. She sat going home in tears again, remembering this child's declaration and protest that was true, and now it's proven that she had nothing in her dark or bad inside her. When she shared this healing, I immediately thought there must be something in this textbook. Mary Baker Eddy experienced being attending patients throughout this since she had discovered Christian Science and had written all the experiences here. Nothing in this textbook, Science and Health, is a third person experience. Everything she had experienced, thought through, listened, and prayed to find the words to explain what happened. And this is what I found and immediately shared with the students and the instructor. It says on page 264, spirit and its formations are the only realities of being. Matter disappears under the microscope of spirit. Spirit and its formations are the only realities of being. Matter disappears under the microscope of spirit. When we look through a microscope in the lab, we're looking for material evidences. Here she's saying microscope of spirit, spirit written with capital S. When we look through this microscope of spirit, you don't see matter. You see spiritual facts, spiritual evidences. It's also truly based on the Bible, where I found later when I was reading the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus says, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. This again has something to do with seeing. The light of the body is the eye. It's a single eye, like a microscope of spirit. When we're seeing with the single eye view of how spirit sees, your whole body shall be full of light. In the Japanese Bible, this phrase is translated as, if therefore your eye be pure, your whole body shall be full of light. The word translated into single also can be translated into pure and also simple. That child, that the niece that was declaring this truth, protesting that you have nothing dark inside you, was doing justice with her pure, single, simple eye view of spirit. Not that she was going to a Sunday school where these two books are taught. She innately knew because she is the image and likeness of God. We are bringing out the truths that we already know to be able to use in our own life in a very practical way. And that's why I love the study of Christian Science. It's a science to bring out your spiritual and divine sense of your existence, the ability to fully be active to bless yourself, of course, but also your neighbors. To have a very narrow view of spirit or God will not help, but the sense of expansive God that is for everyone, impartial, in infinite God. That's what Jesus understood, that everybody was the image and likeness of being. So this happened in India, and to talk about the sense of boundless nature of this science, I want to now move to China, where my husband was traveling with my daughter, who used to work in China. They decided to take a little vacation and way into the countryside. I was in Tokyo taking care of my parents at that time. When I just finished my grocery shopping in Tokyo, I received this text from my daughter, who was still using this, old-fashioned flip phone. But the text said, "Pray, Papa is in pain." It didn't say anything else. It was a very simple, direct order. I found a bench, put my grocery bags down, closed my eyes. I had no idea why he was in pain, but I knew this divine parent, this divine spirit knows where they are and exactly know that how much they're loved. So I just began to see that how God would see them. Soon, the next text came before I sent my text back to say, yes, I received and I'm praying. The next text said, "Papa is fine." Well, when he came to Tokyo, he explained to me what happened. He had all the symptoms of food poison, and he was in great pain, perspiring. And he became like a bowl down closer to the ground and could not really keep himself straight. After my daughter texted me, he said suddenly he felt a very strong punch in his stomach and something went out. He could just stand up. And he said to my daughter, "I'm fine. The pain is gone." And that's when my daughter texted me again. Well, they went into the wilderness, so I didn't know what happened until he came back to Tokyo. It really shows that with this view, it doesn't have any sense limitation by distance or time. In fact, that I didn't even need to know the whole detail what had happened to my husband. The important thing that I had to rely on was to know that God sees him in his image and likeness. And there was nothing that was unlike good, that the word God comes from, that good was inside him. Nothing had altered him. Nothing had been taken out or been added to him because, as I said, we have the perfect God creating a perfect man. That man, in the image and likeness of God or Spirit, is complete. It's done. It's all whole at that very moment. And so I'd like to share this experience, because sometimes you feel something is happening, maybe to your family members, way, maybe the other side of the globe, and you just wonder, can I pray for that person? Or maybe you hear a news that you feel so saddened. Can I pray? We need to pray, because our view of seeing the situation from God's eye view is so important. Well, Mary Baker Eddy had established a church, and we call these churches either First Church of Christ Scientist, and then you add the name of the town. And in case of Ellsworth, you have Society, Christian Science Society in Ellsworth. So she wanted to really make sure that we have some structures that we can come together to study, ponder. And every week we have this Bible lesson that we read passages from the Bible and citations from this textbook, Science and Health, to really ponder on the ideas that we need to sometimes rethink. About next week, we'll be studying about God. And what about God that we need to know more that relates to our healing? But in the weekly Sunday service that we have, we always end with the statement. It's called Scientific Statement of Being. And I'll just share the very first part. It's on page 468. It says, there is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation. For God is all in all. It has few more sentences after that. But this, I realize that there's no life, truth, intelligence, no substance in matter. Remember that instructor's healing. When we see things through the microscope of spirit, matter disappears. Why does matter disappear? Here is the ultimate answer. It says, because there's no life, because there's no intelligence, because there is no substance in matter. This, to me, is Mary Baker Eddy's understanding of God's eye view of reality. All is infinite mind, written with capital M, divine consciousness and its manifestation. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation. For God is all in all. Well, now we were in China, in Japan. We are moving to Korea to share this last healing. When I put my name on the public domain so that anyone can call me to pray or to listen to or to study Christian Science with, and guiding them to use these two books. These two books are our pastor. Our churches don't have a in-person minister or preacher or priest. These two books guide us. But anyway, one time I received a call from a Christian scientist, a student of Christian Science in Seoul, Korea. And I had known him for some years. And at that time, I also knew that he was trying to help one of the in-laws, his daughter's father-in-law, to have healing. But this gentleman wanted to really try every cutting-edge science that dealt with the medical science, that's what I meant, that was used for a disease that he had, which was cancer. He came to the United States. He went to Texas, Houston. He went to New York to visit these places for the most recent treatment that he could receive. But at this point, that when the student of Christian Science called me, they exhausted all means that he tried in the United States. He was sent back to Korea. And this gentleman told me that I asked the permission to call you, but right now he is in the state of coma. He cannot talk to you. So can you come to Seoul, Korea? Can you find a flight as soon as the earliest flight possible to come here as soon as possible? Well, I had to ask my husband and made sure that my children had places to go while I was away. I didn't know how long I was going to go. So I got a ticket and flew over to Seoul, Korea. I arrived at night and was taken to this gentleman. His name was Mr. Cho. Mr. Cho's room is a private room in the hospital. His families were all waiting outside. The student of Christian Science left me with Mr. Cho, who is not moving, just very quiet and dark. Sitting next to him, the only thing I knew about Mr. Cho is that he had this claim of cancer, but also that he spoke Japanese. He had an education in Japan. So I was sitting there thinking, why am I here? And I knew the reason I was there is because his family loved him. So I said to myself, love brought me here. And then I asking God, because God is really knowing everything about him more than I do. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to pray? But I just thought I should be very quiet. And in that quiet moment, a thought came to me. It said, see what I see. And I knew this I was God, and God is love. So I saw him in this view, how love would see him, and himself being loving. I knew God was life. The Bible gives us different names for the Bible, for God. Life is one of them. If God is seeing, if life is seeing him, I see activity in him. I see vitality. I see life in him. And as I was thinking through this, I heard the noise. So I opened my eyes, and this gentleman is looking at me. He said something in Korean. So I said, I'm Fujiko. I'm Japanese. I came from United States. And he said in Japanese, oh, Fujiko-san. He remembered that his in-law had talked about me. And the next thing he said was, where's my family? So I said, your family's waiting outside. And he said, would you please go get my daughter? I want to walk. That was a request. So I rushed out, and I knew which one was his daughter because he had two sons and a daughter. I told her, your father's calling you. And in tears, she came with me thinking that he would still be lying on the bed. When I opened the door, he was sitting at the end of the bed looking for his slippers. his daughter on one side and myself on the other side. He stood up, not even hanging onto both of us, either one of us. We walked out of the room and walked the entire floor of that ward. It was a very big hospital. At least, I think there were 4 nurse stations, and every time we pass the nurse stations, the nurses will pop out and look at us. We finally went back to his room. He said, "You need to rest, Fujiko-san." He let me go. The next morning when I visited him, he was sitting in the sofa, not attached to any equipment or medicine. He looked at me and said, "Come." So I went, sat next to him, and he said, "Fujiko-san, did you pray for me?" Because he probably heard his in-laws say someone can come and pray for him. I said yes. And he says he started to look around the room, and then he said, "Where did you look to pray? I don't see any statue." To that I said, "Mr. Cho, I don't need a statue. My God is love, and this God is everywhere, and it's also your God." And to that he immediately said, "No, I am Confucius." So I said, "Well, whatever you are, the Confucius or Buddhist, this God does not see you by different religion. This God loves you." So we started to pray, and I found out from his students, not students, from his children, that he not only had the cancer, but the cancer was in his leg, in his thigh, and he had not walked for months. I was in awe because the very first thing he said was, of course, wanting to see his daughter, but he wanted to walk. It just proved to me that what I had just read about scientific statement of being, there was no life truth intelligence, no substance in matter. Well, as we were also speaking, he asked me, what is my purpose in life? I have built 3 different companies and given to my sons and son-in-law. What is my purpose? Now that I'm here, everybody thought he would just pass after being in a state of coma. What came to me was I was listening. It was not my opinion. What came to me was to tell him, "Mr. Cho, your new job is to love." He just looked at me and he said, "That's a job?" The first time the nurse came in after this conversation, he said to this nurse, "You have been working so hard and this job is very difficult. Would you like to have a position in my company?" I was surprised, and moreover, the nurse was so surprised. And when the next nurse came with a meal, he said to her, "I can find you a husband because I see you're not married," looking at her hand. This is the way he was expressing love. And then I found out that all his life, well, as an adult life, he had never really expressed love, even to say thank you or delicious to the meals that his wife cooked. I was surprised because Mr. Cho that I knew did not have this sense of hard and cold characteristics. But his children told me that they were always afraid of him. He was known as a tyrant, a person who was so difficult to deal with. After I heard this, I think it was a 3rd day, I asked him, "Mr. Cho, what did you want to become when you were a child?" In fact, I could actually see him running so freely on the beach. He just looked at me and said, "Well, Fujiko-san, as a little boy, and even to early teenage years, I always wanted to become an artist, a painter." He was always painting on the sand, on the paper. But he told me that his father died prematurely, and him being the oldest of the entire clan, he decided to shut this dream and say, "No, I have to work for my family, work so hard to even make sure his siblings, all of his siblings, went through college and universities. Not only his family, but all the relatives that he helped. And he built 3 big companies." Well, I looked at him because when he said artist and painter, his eyes shined. And I said, "Why don't you start painting now or drawing now?" He immediately asked his family member to get the sketch pad and a pastel and pencils. And the following day when I went to his room was full of paintings, drawings of basket full of fruits and flowers that were brought to his room. I knew from the way those paintings and drawings look that he was always an artist. He didn't go to an art school, but his hand was amazingly professional. Not just technically professional, but it had this expression that was so unique. So I share this because I want to share that it didn't really matter whether I was in India, China, or my husband in China, myself in Japan, or this gentleman in Korea, with having all different backgrounds in faith, and even the characteristics that Mr. Cho had not actually returned to be a person who he always was. This child that loved to be an artist and loved expressing himself uniquely. To me, the best healing in this case was that he connected with his children, and his children became his best friends. In a short time, in the rest of the time he had with his family, he was known to be a loving father instead of a tyrant and a difficult person. Well, we talked about how we see, actually knowing how God sees can change our experiences. And the reality is always in the eye of the beholder. That is God. That is loving God, who keeps us in the middle of his eye, seeing in that consciousness. The healing is taking place not because I was mentally manipulating another person, or I'm imagining things, as some people may say, it's a positive thinking, that my daughter texted me, and because there was a sense of positive movement in that my husband was healed. No, the healing in Christian Science includes this Christ, which is really the essence of who Jesus was. He embodied this Christ and was given this title, the Christ. We know him as Jesus the Christ. Mary Baker Eddy understood this significance of separating this Christ with a man, Jesus, and to know that this Christ was always with us even before the time of Jesus, and even now with us and with you. She says in this textbook, Science and Health, on page 332, Christ is the true idea voicing good. the divine message from God to men, speaking to the human consciousness. Christ is a true idea voicing good. That's what awakened Mr. Cho out of coma. Not a person, another man's manipulation. And the divine message is always sending the right message. It says it's speaking to every human consciousness. Speaking to the human consciousness. This consciousness is not brain. I differentiate brain to consciousness by saying that brain is where you add information and the information is recalculated and we'll have another idea out of it. But it always needs to be fed to have something come out of it. Whereas consciousness is instant, immediately knowing, like the intuition, like that child who said, "No, Auntie, you don't have anything dark inside you." She didn't say this because she learned it and heard it somewhere else. It was not out of her brain knowledge. It's a divine knowledge that she had. And that consciousness is what she was speaking from. That consciousness is connecting us, uniting us with this Father, Mother God. We're talking about this reality that God sees. And we're living in this world trying to make sense out of our two eyes and ears. And always it seems like the good and evil are mixed together. In the study of Christian Science, what we're disciplined to do is to drop that eye, the second eye that says, no, you have to have the balance of evil to understand reality. The singleness is so important. And in fact, in the Bible, in James, the New Testament, it says, "Does a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter?" We need to choose and understand the source is one, and the source, if it's sweet water, what comes out of it is sweet. If we mix sweet and bitter water, it's always bitter. We're not going to make sense out of our divine nature or the potential that we have as children of God to bless our community, bless our family, bless our own self, and making sure that we also love ourselves as we love our neighbors. This is really important that we choose the single eye view. The word fountain in that passage, the verse from James, is the same word used for the eye in the earlier passage that I shared. The light of the body is the eye. That word, the eye, is same as the fountain. It has to be pure, single, and simple. Simple in the way that we're not mixing things. There is no confusion in this divine science. Well, this reality, we're now going from one reality to the other. We can constantly know that we're in one reality of spirit, written with capital S. Just like when I ask you to imagine yourself to be a fish, where are you? When I said you are a fish, you're immediately in the water, aren't you? That's the environment that this fish thrives and is most happy in. If we say, as an image and likeness of God, as a spiritual image and likeness of God, where are you? You need to choose to be in spirit, not in this mixed up places, partially matter or partially spiritual. That spirit is your environment. And when I was sharing this idea with my colleague, like another fellow Christian Science lecturer, he told me and informed me that someone who is a contemporary of Mary Baker Eddy, Sojourner Truth had said things very similar to what I came to see. She had already said this many years ago. She said, God is like a great ocean of love. We live and move in it like the fishes of the sea. Sojourner Truth, the slave who became a free man, free person to become a preacher, didn't have any formal education, but she knew this. It's an important truth. This divine consciousness taught her. That's the divine Christ message speaking to human consciousness. So let's become like these fishes in the great ocean of love that celebrate all what you have done in the past months, but to celebrate with this new view that you're always cared for, watched over, and guided in divine view of God. Thank you.
We have some time for some questions and answers for Fujiko. I want to apologize that we were having some server issues on the Vimeo player on the main website. So I see most of you have come over to YouTube at this point. So if you would like to ask a question, you can type in the chat box that should be on the right side of your YouTube player, or if you're on your phone, it'll probably be underneath the YouTube player. Or if you're still on the original website, you are welcome to type into the chat box that is below the player there and ask a question. And if you type in either of those places, we'll be happy to share the question with Fujiko, and she'll give you an answer. In the meantime, while people are taking a moment to find that, I would like to thank the Christian Science Society in Ellsworth, Maine, and the Christian Science Church in Bangor, Maine, for putting on this talk today. We appreciate it and appreciate the wonderful message that's been shared here. So we'll just take a moment for people to find that chat box and type their questions. I'm realizing too that YouTube is playing about a minute slower than live, so we'll wait probably a minute here. I also want to mention that for those of you who may have missed part of the beginning of the talk, or for those who would like to share it, there will be a replay available of this talk on the website that you started on, christianscienceellsworth.com. There'll be a replay there that you can watch, and it will be up probably about 24 hours after this talk.
Thank you, Brian.
So here's one question.
Okay.
How do we see someone, like you were describing in the lecture, when they seem very difficult, maybe a hard personality? How do we continue to see them in that childlike way?
Yes, when I shared that episode from my elementary school, that I was washed over by this sense of love, that I felt to love was so beautiful. That sense is in everyone, and I don't think we can personally, willfully love someone to try to correct the way we feel about another person. But what I learned from that experience was that it was not my place to love or hate or to like or dislike. But it came to me that there was much higher sense of love that loves all of us. And so when it is so difficult to love someone who is exhibiting, like Mr. Cho used to be, uh, you know, exhibiting some a sense of misunderstanding and hardness, I think it's always good to go back to where this love is originated. That it's not my will, but it is really God knowing and loving this person. And maybe walk away from that, just thinking that love will guide both of you, the person that you're trying to love, and yourself being able to see more of that love and not influenced by that person's personality. Personality is, to me, kind of a added clay, materially added on a person that's not really originally there. So we know that some time we will see it washed and cleansed in our own thought, but also in that person.
Great. We have another question. Someone asks about Jesus' healing in the New Testament of the man who was born blind. And they ask, is that healing repeatable today?
Yes, I have read the healing accounts that we have a record of healing of the blind. And I think the important thing probably here is that Jesus didn't really see a person lacking anything. Of course, to human sense, it's changing from not seeing to seeing. But then again, when God is seeing that person, everything that about this person is complete. In that sense, is a perfect man coming from perfect God. So we're thriving. If some cases might come, it might take all of this a sense of understanding, but most of the time it's helpful to not to see the problem as a center of our prayer, but it's God's view is center of my prayer, at least for myself.
Great. Another question we have is Nancy asks that she's feeling stuck in a place where she doesn't belong. How do you pray about that?
Okay, you feel like you're in the box, and there's must be a sense that the circumstances put you in that box. But as I was sharing about the limitation, if we are seeing ourselves as material, and our circumstance as humanly built, then sooner or later we will feel we're stuck. But if we start to feel like I must be an image and likeness of spirit, you are right now free. And the walls that seem to be surrounding you will become transparent. And you walk out. And I'm sure those who were slaves like Sojourner Truth was, that the circumstances that they felt they were born in, that they're stuck in, dropped because they had faith to see beyond matter, material circumstances. I think most important thing is to see religion as not a doctrine, a creed, or walls that surround us, a building. But religion is something that we can go beyond meta, physical experience to unite with a bigger love and life. In fact, I found out recently, religio, actually means to unite. And what are we uniting with? We're not uniting just with people in the building. We're uniting with this experiences of awe. When you come to see this spiritual power, or sometimes you may find it's an inspiration that must be coming from beyond what you already know, you're in awe. And you unite with that power or force. Or light, you might say light. That's really the origin of the word religion. So you can be free when you start to think, I'm an image and likeness of Spirit, God. And these walls, the circumstances, have no power.
One person asks, do you see any common ground between Christian Science and Eastern religions?
Well, I think all different religions have the purpose, the original purpose. The person who start the so-called religion, say Buddha, or Muhammad, or we'd say Jesus, or even in case of Jewish tradition, it may be Abraham as the father of their faith. I think the purpose is always to find freedom, not to restrict. The true nature of religion or philosophy, if you're talking about Eastern philosophy, might be Hinduism or Buddhism or many others in the Eastern religion. What I think it has common thread is that sense of understanding reality from the standpoint of consciousness instead of brain doctrine. When I came to study Christian Science, I remember the part of the scriptures in Buddhist text. It says, whatever has color is nothing. Nothing has color. That really made me think of what I was studying in Christian Science. There is no life, truth, intelligence, no substance in matter. So that there's a sense of temporary dream in Eastern philosophy or religion, that we are here temporarily, and until we have an enlightenment, we will continue either by reincarnation or just continue the dream. But in Christian Science, we also learn that as long as you believe that you're material, bound by this limited sense, death doesn't make you somehow freer. The dream continues. it is still the enlightenment to have this light in darkness, to see this light coming not from within our own selves, but it's the light of the entire divine consciousness. And I think there are many things that you can connect with, but I think with Christian Science, um, loving your neighbor as yourself, as in all different religion, also includes healing, practical healing, or even finding things. I was amazed that they use prayer to find lost item in our study, and that's because it's not seeing with our own human eyes, but with divine seeing. Nothing is lost. That's the kind of teaching that I didn't really encounter in the Eastern philosophy or religion. But that divine mind seeing, knowing, guiding, loving, and even becoming the medicine for whatever that you're being challenged was really new to me.
Thank you, Fujiko. Another question we have is someone asks, what are some inspired ideas for studying the weekly Bible lesson? And maybe not everyone on this live stream knows what the weekly Bible lesson is or what the questioner is referring to. So maybe you can tell people what that is and then answer the question.
Yes, I just have this. We have something called. Can you see Christian Science Quarterly Bible Lessons? And every week we have a topic. We have 26 topics altogether that all circulates or changes weekly, and none of the lessons are exactly the same as one before, even the same topic. And each every Sunday we read the entire citations that's presented in this quarterly. And it consists of citations from the Holy Bible and the ones from Science and Health with key to the scriptures. If we say correlative passages from our textbook, Science and Health, it's not to replace the Bible, but to deepen our understanding of what Bible is sharing. The word is shared both in Old Testament and in the New Testament. But the question was, how can one who is week after week studying these Bible lessons can be inspired? I think, to me, one of the best ways is to have the reason to study it. It sounds really simple, but if you have something or someone that you want to really help, it could also be your own self, but sometimes it's really helpful to have the purpose to study. The studying to really find a gem, an idea that sparks that inspiration, to try to find some ways to see things that leads to healing. But if you're just reading as almost an exercise, it might get to a point that you may feel it's just a routine. But if you're reading it because you have a reason to, because you're going to use some of the insights and inspiration, I think your study will be more exciting.
Thank you. Another one of our listeners says that her grown daughter has stopped talking to her, and even her other children don't know why. And she's wondering, how can she pray about that, because she's feeling very sad about it at the moment.
Yes. Well, I had someone who called me with this similar situation. Her daughter was not speaking to her for a couple of decades. She even wrote us this very hateful letter at one point, and she called me because she was upset. In your case, maybe you don't understand why, but most of the time we don't understand why, because we feel that you don't really deserve to be somehow left out of this whole picture, why you deserve to be treated that way. But anyway, when she said, should I just tear this uh, letter that was sent to her, or write a letter back to her explaining, why she feels that this was not right, or maybe call her. I asked her if that letter had a blank space that's, like the edges have a little space to write something. I said, that letter that you have, you're going to fill with a pen the word love. Just write love everywhere on that letter. This letter that she said was full of hatred. And I said to her, put that letter back into the envelope and put it somewhere that you keep your precious things. In her case, it was a jewelry, the drawer full of jewelry. She put back that letter. I said, think that letter was a love letter. And she just thought it was really strange exercise, but she did it. A few days later, she called me and said she was sewing all the curtains for her living room. She was redoing her drapery. And right before she was ending the last piece that she was sewing, she realized that she was not wearing her spectacles, the glasses, to put the thread through the eye of the needle. And she was in her senior years. She always needed glasses to put thread through the eye of the needle. So she called me and said, were you praying about my eyesight? And I said, no. And then it dawned on me that when she was doing that exercise and we were both praying, not focusing on hatred or why these things are happening, her eyesight was improved. And 2 weeks later, this lady received a call from the daughter, and she apologized. And they met, soon after that. And I never heard from her again. But this experience made me think that when we feel that there is a gap of misunderstanding or of communication, we need to fill that gap with love. That's what actually literally happened when she was writing love, love, love all over that paper, and then putting in a place where she put it away. When she called about this healing of eyesight, she said she was not feeling upset about her daughter anymore. It didn't make her think that she needed to hear from her or to respond to her. So I'm just speaking from this one experience, but I feel what we are feeling is this sense of lack or gap that makes us feel uneasy, uncomfortable, sad. But if we fill that gap with love, we will know that our Father would communicate with her, communicating with you. Never accept to be a victim. Never accept lack. or gap or space that is empty. Every space in your consciousness, in your heart, fill it with love. It's a divine love, loving you.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have another question. Someone asks, can you comment on astrology? Can it affect our lives?
Interesting. Astrology, yeah, in all of the world, we have different ways to predict or even plan based on astrology or the time that you're born, the date that you're born. And it's interesting, if one astrology says something and you give the same information to the other astrological information, it could be completely opposite. And that really shows that depending on the tradition that you're growing up with, it really is a belief of that culture or tradition that makes that astrological either prediction or um, you know prophesy. Sometimes someone say this will happen, it does happen. The more people believe in it, it establishes it. But if this one astrological way of doing things have different results than the other ones from the other culture or tradition, it proves that it's not the absolute truth. And we are actually being manipulated by uh, the thoughts of the people in that culture, but also by statistics. Even in medicine, I feel that there is a sense of relying on statistics determine the outcome. And if 90% of people experience this, then you're told that 90% of this result is going to happen to you. It's not much more different than astrology. I think it's most important to really always seek answer directly from divine mind, written with capital M. It's very important that we don't rely on these statistics because it fluctuates. If it depends, and I love 91st Psalms in the Old Testament. It does talk about the statistics actually, where it says to actually be aware of statistics. It says here, 1,000 shall fall at thy side and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee, not near you. 1,000 shall fall at your one side and 10,000 on one. It really doesn't matter. That's also almost like a statistic. But you're not going to be affected by these. You're walking right in the middle, facing God. Light, facing light. Not being drawn to this darkness, these valleys that seem to have a very attractive sense of fall. Sometimes falling into these information is much easier because you can tell people not to go by checking the calendar or the date of your birth. I have seen these in Japan too, but in China and India, it really affects the family because if you don't marry someone of the right born under the right star, that you are disowned. Sometimes the whole family will lose a sense of unity. So, what can we be aware of, be alert to, is that we're not being influenced by statistics and the mass thoughts or idea or psychology that it feels this was right or wrong. A very good question.
Well, that's all our questions for this evening. Thank you for taking that variety of questions and for those wonderful responses. I know it's about 8:30 Eastern Time now in Maine, and we would like to thank one last time the Christian Science Society in Ellsworth and also the Christian Science Church in Bangor, Maine for putting on this lecture today. And just to repeat one last time, a replay of this lecture will be available on christianscienceellsworth.com about 24 hours from now, and you'll be able to watch any part you missed or share it with other people who might be interested in hearing this talk. And so that's it for this evening. Thank you so much, Fujiko. And do you have any final message to send us off with?
Well, I hope you will remember at least one thing out of this lecture, that you are the child of his eye, the apple of his eye, that love never diminishes, that love is protecting you, holding you, and giving all what you need every moment. Thank you.
He is risen, it is true. He is risen, we are risen, in one life forever new. He is risen, we are risen, he is risen, it is true. He is risen, we are risen, in one life forever new. Watch, a weapon in one hand, build a wall, Jerusalem, with God our guardian. God has given me this work, so none can stay my hand. I will not come down nor cease till the wall stands strong and grand. Build the wall, Jerusalem, build against all odds. Build though fear and doubt assail, nothing threatens God. I will stand upon my watch, building day and night, rallying my tired thoughts, tempted to take flight.